Hello, my name is Owen and welcome to a recap of my reading journey in the month of May 2024. All I can say is this, we're back. We're back. This is the first month since like February where I'm not sad with these numbers at all, not even ashamed of them a little bit, all right? We're so back. This month we read 4 books, a total of 1,949 pages, which is about 600 more than last month. That's a success. One more book, 600 more pages read. Although there is an asterisk next to those 4 books read, because I did listen to 2 audiobooks this month. As you know, I got a love-hate relationship with audiobooks. Sometimes I love them, sometimes in the audiobook groove. Sometimes I hate them, and they ruin books for me. But it was a bit of a gamble doing these audios, especially for our book of the month, Under Heaven, which is the first audiobook I listened to. But this was a case where I was going to be in a car a lot for a very, very long time, so I could afford to take it slow, rewind where necessary, really get the meat of it. And it was a great audiobook experience. I really enjoyed that. Funny Story was the other audiobook that I listened to. Those books, I feel like it's less... they're a little bit simpler in terms of their story, but there's less like language or terms where you'd be like, wait, well, who is talking? What is the name you just mentioned? What continent are we in? So it's easier to listen to those in audiobook. I feel like where I got stuck was like for Stephen King's books. Stephen King could be a little bit wordy. So trying to listen to 11/22/63 in audiobook form just didn't work for me, and maybe DNF the book, which was unfortunate. But Funny Story was no problem listening to that in audiobook as well. So those are 2 great audiobooks. Half the books we read were in audiobook form, which... some may say that why'd you convert them into page numbers? Hey, Storygraph did it, okay? I wouldn't have done it if it wouldn't have done it for me. But I like that it did, because I would have been mad if it would have said like 1,000 pages in like 2.78 hours or something stupid like that. But no, if they were physical books, it would total out to 1,900 pages, so that's what we're going to say. The other 2 books we read were Children of Dune and Six of Crows. So overall, 1 sci-fi, 2 fantasy books, and 1 romance. And who says I'm not well-rounded, right? But overall, it was a great reading month. I enjoyed all of these books to a certain extent. Funny Story is a bit of a letdown for me having read 2 Emily Henry books before in the past. The standout, the Nod of the Month, I think that's what I called it last month, the Nod of the Month, Children of Dune, fantastic. That was my favorite book of the month that I read by far. Under Heaven was a great one. I love Guy Gavriel Kay. I think his writing is fantastic, and I really got to start reading more of his books because I've loved every single one that I've read. And Six of Crows, I did enjoy. I thought it was a fun blockbuster fantasy read, although I didn't love it as much as I thought that I would, so I didn't jump straight into the sequel like I thought I would. I thought I was going to go straight into Crooked Kingdom after finishing Children of Dune. But I didn't. Instead, I listened to an audiobook, Funny Story, and I started 2 books that I'm going to finish in the month of June. So I kind of skipped over that Crooked Kingdom. I will come back to it relatively quickly, but it's not a priority. I thought I'd be like cliffhanger ending, and it was a bit of a cliffhanger ending in Six of Crows, but I want to go straight into it. Nice, quick, fun fantasy read. But you know what? I didn't love it that much, so I'm going to let it sit for a little bit. We're going to probably focus on some other books on the shelf and the 2 other books that I'm reading currently, which will be revealed in my What I'm Going to Read in June video, so stick around for that one. But overall, it was a great month. I enjoyed it. I will say that the only downside to reading so much fantasy is it feels a little bit, and I've said this before, this isn't news, guys, it feels a little bit oppressive to read a bunch of fantasy at the same time. That's why I said at the beginning of the year I wasn't going to read a lot of fantasy. I wanted to move away from it because oppressive in the sense that you finish a fantasy book, and that's why I loved Under Heaven as a standalone. You finish a fantasy book like Six of Crows, there is that pressure to continue the series, right? And then last month I read Grace of Kings, right? And I really had to draw a line with myself and say, I'm not going to read all of these sequels, even though I did enjoy the book. And I felt that one stood alone enough that I could put it aside. Six of Crows, less so, but I'm still going to put it aside for a little bit because if you think about it, guys, I'm getting more and more behind with fantasy books, and I just can't stop getting into new series without continuing the rest of them. We've been rereading Malazan for a year now. I started this on June 1st of last year, my reread, and we have yet to start book 5. For Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderling series, I read the first trilogy over a year ago now. I finished the Live Ship trilogy in January, February. I'm really interested to get into Tawny Man. Have not started that yet. And then now, for our book of the month for June, I already announced it's going to be The Shadow of the Torturer, which is another epic fantasy series that apparently gets in the weeds, takes a lot of concentration, and I just started it like a madman. So what am I doing? What am I doing? I can't read them all. I can't have a 6-month span where I'm only reading sequels to fantasy books that I already read. I need to somehow add an extra week to each month where I just read sequels of fantasy books, right? Because I don't want that to take over my reading schedule, and I don't want it to take over the channel by proxy, right? Because I did say last month that I was hoping to get started into Midnight Tides at the end of May, which obviously we didn't touch, and I do want to start that ASAP, but if we got Crooked Kingdom up our butts, and we got our book of the month, which I'm happy to read, which thankfully is a shorter one, but I'm sure the sequels of that will be pressing on me, and I want to get into Tawny Man. It's just too much series, right? And it's not gotten to the point where it's an overload, where I feel like I got to start cutting ones and never reading a series or with books with sequels ever again. We're not there yet. This is a foreshadowing video, because keep an eye out in June or July, I'll probably make a video, why I quit reading series, and you'll know why. It's because of the slow building, the overwhelmingness of it all. So I feel like, and I think I go into every month with this mindset where I'm going to read a lot of standalone, get these standalone books off my shelf, stuff like that, and then I just end up not doing that because I'm a psychopath, and I'm like, well, when I'm going to read God Emperor of Dune, and that's just another one to the list. So I guess my question to you is this. How many series, listen, and I'm sure the psychology is the same, right? You guys don't like reading too many series at the same time, because I'm the same way. I think only a psychopath is like, well, I'm reading 7 book 1s right now, and a book 4 and a book 7. I just don't think people do that. It's too many worlds and characters and ensembles in your brain at the same time. But my question is, how many series do you guys read at a time? Do you only read one? And how do you guys feel like after you finish a big series, you finish a 10-book series, are you diving into another series? Do you like to sprinkle in standalones there? Do you take breaks in between sequels is another question I have. Because usually, I used to be a sequential binger, right? Where if I'm reading book 1 of a series, I'm finishing the series. It's my only focus. The first time I read Malazan, it took me a year, but that was the book I was reading all the time. I threw in some sprinkled ones every once in a while, but the one book I was reading was always an entry. But now I feel like in the last 12 months or so, it's been read book 1, 2 months later come back to book 2. Which is a strategy, right? And looking ahead to books that are coming out that I want to read later, new releases wise, I'm thinking about the new Stormlight. Even though I've been out on Brandon Sanderson for a while, I haven't had any interest in his works. Stormlight is a series that I've read 4 books in now, so I want to see how it ends. I love those characters. But then I'm thinking well, that's an epic fantasy series that could use a reread, right? A reread leading up to it. And how does rereads play into all this? Because I'm rereading Malazan, so I don't want to reread anything else. And yet, am I really rereading it if it's taking me a year to read 4 books? I would argue yes, but I would also argue that I can't do a reread of Stormlight leading up to the release of it is book 5, right? Book 5 at the end of this year. And those are monster books, 1,000+ pages, some of them. Fantasy is such a time-consuming genre, which I feel I don't know how we got this far off topic, but I feel like that's maybe the reason why it's a niche. And not a niche in the sense of it's not that popular. Fantasy is very, very popular. And people like to make videos where it's people think fantasy isn't real books. No normal, sane person has ever said that. It's that's not a real book you're reading. It's a fake book. Probably the last time someone said that was 1987, right? But it's a genre that some people just don't touch at all. And I think that's part of the entry barrier is you're entering an agreement to read a series, right? Which some people aren't into, and I can see why. I personally love a series. I love to revisit characters that I love. There's nothing more tragic than reading a standalone and saying, this character will never exist again. They only exist in the confines of this single book. It's just something to think about, guys. It's just what my brain's been whirling around, right? As you know me, I'm quite the thinker. That's what makes me so intelligent. But be sure to like and subscribe if you like the video and you want to see any more like it in the future. It was a recap, but it was something more this month. And for that, I enjoyed it personally. I thought this one was fun. Let me know what you guys are reading in the comments, how your reading month went in May, and then look forward to my what I'm reading in June video. That'll be coming out shortly. And as always, thanks for sticking around.